Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has finally happened. The Sony Spider-Man Universe has come to an end. At least for now, according to what the reports say. Personally speaking, I wish that they would just remove the "for now" part of that statement and just say it is officially over, because I don't know if even humanity can endure more of these movies. But that's what we're here to talk about today. In this video, I am going to explain and break down what the real reasons were for why this universe failed as horribly as it did, with the recent entry Kraven the Hunter completely bombing out at the box office and also with the fans and critics. A question to you, the fans and the audience watching this video, is this the worst a universe has ever been handled in film? We've seen countless examples of this already, from how horror franchises were handled in the 80s and on with countless bad sequels, how the comic book genre was handled in the 90s with a bunch of really bad films, the dark universe for monsters that couldn't even get off the ground after one film, or something like the Snyderverse of DC that was just painful after the first couple of movies. Let me know down below in the comments. But the example, as I just said, that we are talking about today is how Sony has handled the Spider-Man universe with owning the rights to the classic and iconic comic book character, his villains, and other various side characters. There are multiple reasons why this universe failed spectacularly, but there is one that is not being talked about enough, quite frankly, at all, that I want to address in this video for what I believe might be one of the biggest reasons for why it was so bad. That very reason has something to do with a certain producer who has his name on all these films, and that producer goes by the name of Arad. Now, in the more central film industry circles and communities, lots of people know who this guy is. But if you are just more of a casual fan who goes and watches movies without thinking about what producers are on said film, then you are not gonna know who this is. However, you definitely will know the movies that he has his name on. He has 70 producing credits, a majority if not all of which are around superhero and comic book properties that were adapted to film. Many of them range from in very good quality to then some of the worst comic book films you've ever seen, of which relate to the example we are talking about today with the Sony Spider-Man Universe. The man goes and produces a film like Spider-Man 2, which some have considered is not just the best Spider-Man movie ever, but one of the best comic book films of all time. And then he goes and produces some of the worst crap imaginable with some of the films in this universe that we are talking about today. Now, there is a caveat here, because he doesn't actually have a producing credit on a film like Madam Web. However, that doesn't excuse the fact that he does have a producing credit on all the other films, such as Morbius, Kraven the Hunter, and the Venom films. The job of a producer is to make the business and financial decisions for a film, stage production, or a TV show. They raise money for the project and hire the directors and crew, which may include designers, editors, and other workers. They are essentially a form of a business exec who comes in and makes a lot of the decisions. When it comes to the Sony Spider-Man universe, I think that Avi made some of the worst possible decisions a producer has ever made when handling a property. He didn't go out and hire the best filmmakers, and he certainly didn't look like he wanted to put any care in making good quality films. These movies almost feel like that they're not being made by the directors that he puts in charge. They feel like they are being made by him and then also by committee of the studio. You won't convince me otherwise that the Sony Spider-Man character films have not felt like complete cash grabs for the sake of using a property and its name just to make a quick buck. I tend to not throw out the term cash grab all the time because I think it does get overused, but in this scenario, I almost have to say that it is the right time to use it. And now, in a way, this transitions us over to talking about Sony as a studio with how they've handled this universe and the characters. How does Sony go from doing very good things with the Spider-Verse and Tom Holland MCU films to then go and fumble the ball so hard with characters that are not Spider-Man? The Sony Spider-Verse movies are two of the best animated films that we've ever seen, and yet somehow Sony has their name on it, but so does Avi Arad as well. And this gets to a very important point that we need to distinguish. It's all about the talent that you can hire to tell your stories. When you hire for a character like Spider-Man, you have to look for the best of the best. I think with the Spider-Verse movies, you got two insanely talented filmmakers like Phil Lord and Chris Miller as producers. They had the head producer credits over someone like Avi Arad on that film, and so a lot of the decision making for who gets hired to direct them and write them comes from Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and they went and hired a lot of great talent to make those films. Even with all this in mind, it doesn't take away from the fact that Sony should not have hired him to be a head producer on many of these films, to only then go and turn them into generic comic book slop way before their time movies. I mean, seriously, aside from what Madam Web is, some of these Spider-Man villain movies feel like they were made for a time that doesn't exist anymore, a time when comic book films were not being made well and taken seriously, cheap visual effects that were rushed out without giving the VFX artists time, horrible character development and writing that makes everything bland and boring, and then also no sense of giving the audience a reason to think that these movies matter. Why would you go and watch a movie about a villain who relates to a big comic book hero if that hero has nothing to do with it? Reports are now coming out from the studio clarifying that they weren't constrained to not use the character of Spider-Man. So with that being said, why didn't they use him to begin with? Again, this is a classic case of what it looks like when a studio doesn't know what to do with an IP, and so they just shovel shit out when they think it's cool enough by name to get people to go see it. I can almost guarantee the higher-ups at Sony looked at the names of many of these characters and thought that the dollar signs were all over them. So with that in mind, they didn't think too hard on what talent they would hire and just said, fuck it, who cares, the name will sell it enough, and sadly, that's just not how that works. It's also just a bad case of what we like to call not coming up with a plan beforehand. They just winged it without any second thought in mind, kind of like how Star Wars didn't plan out the sequel trilogy. I've enjoyed a decent portion of Star Wars in recent years, but there's no denying that they fumbled it with the trilogy, just like within the way that Sony did it here with Spider-Man in its world of characters and villains. Now, we can also have a conversation about what Sony can do if they ever were to continue this again, because technically they didn't say that it was fully over. They said that it's done for now, which I'll admit is depressing because it should fully be over. The first thing that you should do is get rid of Avi Arad. Don't let him be head producer or even a general producer on another project. Sadly, his name is on several big name projects coming up, like the new Legend of Zelda movie, a potential Metal Gear Solid film, and also the anime Naruto. Whether or not he is head producer of these films remains to be seen, but that would worry people for sure after seeing what he does when he is a head producer. Second thing you have to do is not do the anti-hero shit again. Guys, look at the Penguin. That is how you do a villain right. You can't do this thing where you make bad guys for a bad guy character. It's just not going to work, because why would you care about that unless the main bad guy you follow stays a bad guy? It's extremely rare that a villain turned anti-hero story works, and Sony couldn't even do that right with these characters, minus Madam Web, who, as I said already, is a good guy in the comics. Third thing you have to do is plan your shit out. Don't just make something because you feel compelled to, or because all you care about is money. If you put care into it, the results will show. I can't stress enough how much people notice this stuff nowadays. The internet does exist. If I can go online and see who's making the movies and decipher how it might turn out, then you'll be quick to realize that it won't be all that shocking when the quality is shit and the result is that it doesn't make any money at the box office. The same thing goes for budgeting your films as well. In no universe should Kraven the Hunter be as expensive as it was. So to be clear, I don't know how different any of these films would have been if Avi Arad would not have produced them. Maybe better filmmakers would have been hired to write and direct, but for now, we can only look at what we were given, and hopefully in the future, it can be learned from with what not to do when making a universe of characters. I disliked all these movies and don't think that they represent what should ever be done again. So there you have it. That's my commentary on the real reasons why the Sony Spider-Man universe failed. What do you all think? Leave your comments down below and let's have a nice and respectful conversation about it. Thank you all for stopping by my channel. If you want to see more moving forward from me with regards to film and television and you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you are new here and turn on that notification bell. I'm trying to build a community on here and your support would be greatly appreciated. That's a wrap, folks. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day and I will see you all soon for the next video.